Tonight's program is called Increasing Biological Life in Your Soil. And our speaker is Theresa Lyngso. She's president of the Lyngso Garden Materials, a 60-year-old family business located in Redwood City. Theresa is a master composter and master gardener, and Theresa and her husband Joe grow California natives, roses, apples, pears, herbs, and annual vegetables in their garden in Loma Mar. So let's welcome Theresa.
2000 or so, I met Patricia Becker at Common Ground in Palo Alto, and she suggested that I might be interested in going to hear Dr. Elaine Ingham speak at UC Santa Cruz. And I said, sounds good about soil and soil life. So I went, and I went through a 3-day workshop with her, and it really opened my eyes and really changed my life. It was a fantastic experience, and she still speaks usually annually in the Bay Area. In fact, she's going to be speaking next week at through Common Vision in Castro Valley. So if anyone gets excited about this topic, I think there's still room in the class, and Monday and Tuesday next week will be her introductory lecture to the soil food web, and it's quite an inspiring lecture. And then from there, I went on to become, of course, a master composter, learned all about composting, vermiculture, and then a master gardener. And then, of course, we have our own garden, which, you know, we both work full-time, so we don't get to spend as much time in it as we would like. But we live in Loma Mar, which is out near Pescadero. We're on well, and live in a Doug fir oak woodland area. Used to be an old dairy, so where our property is mainly all weedy grasses. And since we are on well water, and water is, of course, really precious, we decided to focus on natives and to, as much as possible, grow without having to irrigate. And all the more reason to grow the life in your soil, so the life in your soil can really support your plants, and that soil can really hold on to moisture. So this living soil actually creates a living soil structure, and that's probably a good part of what I'll be talking about tonight, is this living soil structure, which is something a little bit different to think about. And a living soil will feed plants through nutrient cycling. It protects the plants from many diseases, holds on to moisture, sequesters carbon in the soil, and builds humus. Humus is extremely important. And I think we all have heard a lot about soil texture and soil structure. When I went through the Master Gardener program, when we had our talk on soils, the professor came in and he said, okay, he put up a slide of the soil food web. I'll show you that slide a little bit later, but he put up a slide of the life in the soil, and he said, yes, there is life in the soil, and I'm not going to talk about it. So, and what he really focused on was soil texture and physical soil structure. And so I just like to talk a little bit about what soil texture is. Soil texture is really determined by the amount of sand, silt, clay, and organic matter that you have in your soil. And that's what you have. And your texture is, you know, that's what you've got. And it's important for you to understand if you've got a sandy soil or a clay soil or a silty clay soil. That's important to know. And then there's soil structure, and there's the physical structure of the soil and the way it clumps together. And then there is the biological structure of the soil and how the microbiology actually builds structure in the soil. And that's really what I get excited about and what I'll be talking about a lot this evening. So here's the chart that we all see, and it's interesting and it's important, and good for you to know. Have an idea of where your soil falls within that chart. And you know, in California, in this area, we have a lot of clay soils, and they can be quite challenging, and we'll talk a bit about that. And this is a photo from near where I live. We live in a valley, but this is up higher, and you can see the mudstone. It's more of a mudstone in our valley as it breaks off and falls to the ground. Is broken down over time. Leaves fall on top. They break down, decompose, and this is sort of, you know, the beginning of how we get soil. It starts with the mineral parent material that's weathered and breaks down over time, and then organic matter decomposes and works its way in there. And this is a picture of a handful of soil from the valley that I live in, and it's, of course, this photo was taken during the winter, after it had rained. But went out into our valley and just pushed the leaves aside and stuck my hand right in and pulled out this beautiful handful of soil. And I really like looking at this handful of soil because it really demonstrates the biological soil structure. You can see all those openings that go into the soil. So that lets you know that air and water are going to be able to also get into the soil, and that's really important. Because all of these billions of bacteria and miles of fungal hyphae that are in the soil, the beneficial ones are all aerobic. They need oxygen, and they need some moisture. And that's who you want to cultivate in your soil. You want the aerobic organisms, the ones that are sort of like us, in that they need air, they need moisture, they need shelter. So living soil and water is really important, and as we move more and more, as we get the population gets much more dense in our area, water is becoming more and more of a precious resource for us. We already know California is a drought climate, and even, you know, we're even more aware of it now, and especially this last year we had very little water. So a living soil allows water and air to penetrate and recharge the groundwater, and that's really important. You want the water, the rainwater that falls on the ground, to go into the soil. You don't really want it to run down your driveway and down the storm drain and out directly to the bay. Much better for it to go through the medium of the soil. Because as it does that, then the soil actually filters and transforms many pollutants so that the water is cleaned as it runs through it. And a living soil creates lots of spaces, so there's all these little pores and all these spaces of all different sizes where water can be held in the soil and where the roots of plants can get at that water over time. So you'll find when you have a living soil, your roots are going to go deeper into the soil, and you're not going to have to water as often. Earthworms are a great sign of a biologically active soil. When soils are pretty alive, you'll see earthworms in it, because earthworms like to eat all those critters that are in the living soil. That's what they eat. And when you've got a lot of earthworm activity in your soil and they're moving around a lot, they are releasing their castings, which are like little inoculation chambers of bacteria, so they're just filled with life. So they're adding diversity to your soil, which is really good. And they're creating some pretty good-sized passageways through the soil so that water can drain through it much better. And as you can see from this test that was done here, there's a significant difference between soils that have earthworm activity in it and soils that don't, and how quickly water will drain through it. Nutrient cycling is fascinating, that the bacteria, that the life in the soil actually can cycle enough nutrients to feed your plants. So you can actually think about feeding your soil and let the life in the soil worry about feeding your plants. The bacteria and the fungal component of this system are the foundation. They're right after the plants. They are the foundation of the soil food web. And nutrients, when you're in a biologically active soil, the nutrients are held within the bodies of the little microbes, so they aren't soluble. They aren't sitting out there in the soil waiting for a rain event to come and then be washed away and down through. They're held in the bodies of the microbes, which is really, really important. And then they're released in the root zone of the plant. And it's an amazing relationship. Plants actually create, they actually feed all these guys. They feed the bacteria and the fungi. They release sugars, carbohydrates in the root zone that calls in exactly who they want to live with them. If they're a more fungally dominant plant, they're going to call in more fungi, just based on what that plant releases in their exudates. If they're more bacterially dominated, they're going to call in the bacteria. So the plants are, Dr. Ingham likes to say, the plants are in charge. And they call in who they want by feeding them. So soil life is just bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and then the little teeny tiny arthropods that are crawling around, and the larger ones that we all see. And that's all part of the soil food web, going up to, our loved ones, the gophers, the moles, the voles, the birds, all part of this food web. This is a picture from our garden of some mulch that we put down, and then we just, it happens to be a wood chip mulch. I brought a couple samples of mulches. It's a wood chip mulch. It's a fresh wood chip mulch, not a, it's not, like the dyed mulches that come from the ground up pallets and construction materials. This is more a fresh wood mulch. And so you can you can see a little bit how the fungi is starting to break down the chunks of wood in there, covered with that white material. And they are very much, in some ways, like us. I mean, the beneficial ones need air, they need water, they need food, and they need shelter. And we can make a big impact on how we provide food for them and how we provide shelter for them, and that will determine how they do in our garden. This is the famous soil food web chart that Dr. Elaine Ingham put together a number of years ago, and you can actually go online and Google soil biology primer, and you will get her work. You will see this chart, and you will get her work explaining each one of these trophic levels. It's fascinating to read, very accessible, easy to understand. She's just done a great job of taking a really complicated subject and making it sort of human. It really is, that first talk, when I went to hear her speak, it's really all about the relationships. It's relationships, and I think that's what did it for me, and got me excited about it, because it was like, well, I could kind of understand relationships, understanding chemical inputs of NPK and macro and micro elements is confusing, and timing and all of that confusing. But if you think of it in terms of relationships, it really simplifies it somewhat. So as you can see, it all starts with the sun and the plants. And the plants release, you know, their roots slough off, and that's food for the microbes. They also release sugars down into the soil, and that calls in the bacteria and the fungi. Bacteria and the fungi colonize all around that root zone. And then the protozoa and the nematodes come in and start eating the bacteria and the fungi. And then the larger macro and micro arthropods start coming in and eating too. So where was I going to go with this? At the level of the bacteria and the fungi, there's not a lot of food being produced for the plant at that level. The bacteria are breaking down everything that's in the soil, all of the organic matter in the soil. They're breaking that down. They're holding it in their little bodies. They aren't releasing a lot to the plant. But when the protozoa and nematodes come along, then they eat the bacteria and fungi, and they release a waste product. And that waste product is just the right form of nitrogen for a plant, and it's right in the root zone. So the plant is able to take it up and get just what it needs when it needs it. This is a picture of compost. This is a more bacterial compost. You can see there's lots of, the little guys in there are bacteria. The threads that are in there are the fungal threads. And then there's some spores of mold in there. And so this is in a really well-made compost. And a really well-made compost will be loaded with a diversity of life. Compost is the most important input that you can add to your soil when you're wanting to move to an organic system. Compost is extremely important, and compost is extremely important for our clay soils. You know, I think you have some particularly heavy clay soils here. I was just at the rose garden before I came here, and I was sort of surprised to see that already the soil there is cracking. You know, so we have these expansive clay soils where we get some rain, and the water eventually, over enough rain, slowly starts to move through the clay, and the clay expands. Then we go into our drought season, the moisture is pulled out of the soil, and then the clay cracks. And I was already seeing cracks in the garden there, and it's only, you know, mid-March, so wow. But those cracks, another way to look at those cracks is they are openings into the soil. So they're allowing some air to get in. If we get any rain, it's gonna be able to work down through those cracks a little bit. They also, I know we probably don't want to hear this, but a great spot for weed seeds to settle in. And much as we don't like weeds, weeds do provide cover for barren soil, which is really important. Weeds do have fabulous roots. You know, there's different kinds of weeds. There's the grassy weeds that have just massive roots. And I'm sure you've all done this, where you go to pull a real grassy weed out of the ground, and wow, look at all the earthworms in there. You know, so there's something going on there, and it's actually over time. You can see how over time those weeds are going to change the soil, and over time you're going to have succession, and higher levels of plants are going to move in. But as humans, you know, we can influence and move things along faster, or we can influence and move things backwards too. So good to know that. This is a picture, again, from our garden of just The bacteria, it's the bacterial action really, and you know, it's in action, breaking down. Here's some oak leaves that are all glued together by the bacterial slimes. The bacteria have released a lot of slimes, and that's how they stay in the root zone of the plants. That's how they are not washed out when the rainwater runs through. They stay there because they glue themselves onto the roots of the plants, onto the organic matter, onto the minerals in the soil. They glue themselves in there. And if any of you have ever taken a piece of cardboard and laid it down on the ground, and maybe the soil's wet and maybe it rains a bit, and then you think, I got to pick this up. You pick it up, and the side that's on the ground is all sticky, and it's already colonized by the bacteria and already on its way to being decomposed. And that decomposition process is compost and eventually humus, which is what we want to be building in our soils. I like this picture just because this is compost. This comes from a big municipal, well, this is from Rodale, where they have a big composting operation. And it just lets you see how much life there is in compost, and at all these different levels of the composting process, there are different organisms that are moving in and doing different things. So you will sometimes see this in our local green waste compost, where you may get a load in your driveway and you let it sit there for a little while, and you come out and you see all this ash. It looks like ash covering your compost. And what it really is it's just a little actinobacteria that's breaking down that tougher, woody part of the compost. It's a little bit harder to break down, and it's working on it and eating it up. So at every single level in the composting process, there is someone there who's breaking that material down and turning it into something else. And when we first moved to Lomamar, we have a carport, okay? And the previous owners let a couple shingles come loose on the carport. So it had been raining a long time, and that water had been dripping down a long time. We had these beautiful Doug fir timbers that were holding up our carport. And on all the Doug fir timbers, there were these gorgeous shelf mushrooms sticking out. And we park our car in the carport. We come out in the morning, and our car is covered with all this gorgeous black humus from the decomposition that the shelf mushrooms are doing to our Doug fir timbers. So needless to say, we did have to remove our carport and rebuild it. And all of those timbers are now, they're now little benches in our garden. But you know, nature is out there. Its job is to decompose and break down any material that was once alive, and it will do it in our homes if we're not careful, and it will definitely do it in our gardens. This is a picture of mycorrhizae on a root tip coated with bacteria. And you know, you probably know that maybe 95% of all plants on Earth have a relationship with the mycorrhizal fungi. Very important relationship, extremely important, I think, in our California native plant community. It sort of knits the community together and makes it stronger. The mycorrhizal fungi is able to mine minerals from the parent rock material and bring that to the plant. It can actually also bring water to the plants. And in our native plant community, if we have fire come through, and as long as the fire isn't too hot, so the soil doesn't get too hot, plants that have that mycorrhizal relationship will recover much quicker. So it's an important one to cultivate. And this is a picture of a more fungal compost and what it would look like under a microscope. The fungal compost is going to be a compost that has more woody material in it. The bacterial composts are going to be the composts that are sort of like maybe what a lot of us have in our backyard, which is where we take our kitchen waste and we take our leaves and clippings from our yard and maybe our grass clippings. We mix that together, maybe 1 part of sort of the green, still fresh stuff, and maybe 2 to 3 parts of the brown stuff. Get that going in the right, you know, you need almost a cubic, you need almost 3 by 3 by 3 feet to get the bacteria going. But then the bacteria start going really quickly and they start breaking it down. So that was the earlier slide. This is woody material. So say you have oak trees and you take your oak leaves and you put them in the corner of your garden where maybe you don't go very often, in a shady spot in the corner of your garden, and you just let them sit there for quite a while, maybe a couple years or so. And then they turn into this beautiful leaf mold, and it's a very, very fungal compost, and good for a lot of woodland plants, maybe good to mix in with your green waste compost and put around your roses because you're increasing the diversity of life. And the fungal compost the fungi is very good at building up humus, and humus is really, really, really good at holding on to water and also holding on to nutrients. It just provides more diversity, and that's what this is all about. It's all about diversity. Here's a picture of a little tiny pine tree and the mycorrhizal fungi. So you can see how much that has expanded the root zone of that plant and how much more area that plant has to draw nutrients from. So the little pine tree is giving, a lot of its energy is going to create food for the fungi to keep it happy. And then there is apparently a communication system that's going on in the soil between the plants and the life in the soil, and the pine tree is letting the mycorrhizal fungi know what it needs, and the mycorrhizal fungi is going out and getting it and bringing it back. This is just a picture of, you know, shelf mushrooms on the ground. We've all seen it, but you know, in time, there won't be anything left of that log, and you'll have some nice, fluffy humus in its place. This is another picture in our garden where this happens to be underneath a canyon oak, and just pull the leaves aside, and there you see it. There you see the fungi. Now, what kind of fungi is that? I have no idea. You know, it might be a saprophytic fungi that's just breaking down the leaves and the wood that's fallen to the ground. I'm assuming that's sort of what it is. It's a saprophytic fungi that's breaking down all that woody material that's fallen to the ground and turning it into humus. And you know, when you see that, you know, generally when you see that, the soil is moist. You look at the soil, you pull the leaves aside a little bit more, and the soil has a lot of openings going into it. It smells fantastic. Smell is one of our senses that we can really use when working with the soil food web, because when things smell really good in the garden and really, you know, that wonderful woody smell, that's usually a sign that you've got a lot of good things going on. When how many of you compost? Do you? Yeah, okay, good. Good. Yeah, so you know when you don't have things set up right in your compost pile and you go out there and you take a sniff, it can smell pretty bad sometimes if you have too many greens in there and not enough browns in there. So your nose, and that scent is telling you that what's happening there is you've got anaerobic bacteria that are working, not aerobic bacteria. And the anaerobic bacteria are not the bacteria that your plant want to live with. So you need to turn that around when you smell that. Or when you go, if you have a low spot in your garden that maybe during the winter rains collects a lot of water, And I had a place like that in my last house, and every time I'd walk by it in the winter, it would smell really bad, sort of sulfury. But you know, it was a natural wet area, and it was really interesting. What grew there were the native California soap plant. It was totally happy there. So, you know, there are some plants that can live in those more sort of watery environments, the riparian plants. But in our compost pile, when it smells stinky, then all we need to do is add some brown material into it, turn it, get some air in there, and it will turn around pretty quickly and go back to anaerobic. And I always like to show a lot of pictures of mushrooms, because when you start working with the soil food web, you're going to start using mulch. And when you start using mulch, you're going to start seeing mushrooms. They're going to pop up, and there's all different kinds that pop up. I don't know who they are, and I don't know if they're poisonous or not. So what I tell people, sometimes people are worried about their dogs eating them or their children eating them, so I just say collect them and throw them in your green bin, or if you have a hot compost pile, throw them in your compost pile. They don't last too long, but there are many different kinds. It's sort of fun to get curious about it and investigate a little bit. This one, the lattice stinkhorn, we have been most fortunate to have in our garden. And it is, when it comes up, it looks like bird's eggs almost, like there's little bird's eggs in your soil. They're so cute. And then the flies come in and they pick away at it and eat it, and you end up with this bright orange. This photo doesn't do it justice, with this really bright orange lattice that's gorgeous, and you can see it clear across the yard. The only problem with it is it gives off a very obnoxious smell like dog poo, so that's why it attracts all the flies. But you might see that in your garden, and I've seen it a little more than I like in my garden, so now when I see the little eggies come up, I just pick them out. And then the slime mold. The slime mold is another one. This actually isn't fungus. This is actually a protozoa. And it's pretty interesting to watch. It comes in, it's very brightly colored, and usually you will find it on wood chips, and it moves just a little bit. If you don't like it, you should break it up and you know, put it in, break it up right away. If you do like to leave it and look at it, what'll happen is it will dry out completely, and when you go to touch it, it will just release all these millions of spores. And I don't know, I kind of enjoy it, so I just leave it alone and watch it, and I get it every once in a while. Some years I don't have it, some years I do have it. Colors vary. It's just interesting, all these forms of life, and what it's doing is it's just eating the life that's in the soil, and it's just part of the decomposition process. So when you start working with biologically active soil, you're sort of inviting in a whole lot of other life into your garden, and I really you know, encourage people to get curious about it, Google it, find out what it is that it likes to eat in your garden, and maybe see if anyone likes to eat it. It's just ever fascinating, I think. So then we get to the protozoa, which is, at this level of the soil food web, this is where nutrient cycling is happening. This is where your plants start to get fed by the biology in the soil. And they help build soil structure too. They move around a little bit, where the bacteria has glued themselves together, where the fungi has wrapped themselves around the roots and the clay and sand and silt in the soil, the organic matter. They move around in there and create little openings. They make nutrients available, as I said, by excreting a waste product. And they excrete that waste product, for the most part, very fortunately. They're most active in the rhizosphere of the root zone, or rhizosphere of the plants. So that waste product is right there where the plant can take it up. If the plant doesn't take it up, the bacteria or the fungi take it up, so it's held within their body. So there's nothing lost You know, it's not like when you go and when you're using a lot of chemical fertilizers, if that's primarily what you use in your garden, primarily chemical fertilizers, over time those chemical fertilizers start to damage the soil food web, especially if you use them heavily, and also if you use things like fungicides and insecticides. Starts damaging the soil food web, and what happens is that when we have a rain event, or when you put your, say you put some soluble chemical fertilizer down, the plant's only going to take up a small amount of that. You know, they've done studies and that they don't take up very much. They take up, you know, maybe 40% or so, and then the rest is just going to move farther down in beyond the root zone, so it's not going to be available to the plant, and also can move out into our waterways. And you know, we all know the problems that that we have in our waterways from overuse of chemical fertilizers. So the microbes really help keep all that in the soil and not let it run away, which is really good. It's much more efficient. We're not wasting nutrients, and the plant's getting exactly what it needs when it wants it. The protozoa, there's one of them, the little ciliates, which are indicators of compaction. And if any of you have microscopes and are so interested in looking at your soil, or maybe looking at some compost tea, you can see very easily the ciliates moving around. They're kind of cute. They move in circles. They're very fast. And they really love to eat anaerobic bacteria. So if you've got ciliates, big bunch of ciliates, it's a sign that you're either going anaerobic or coming out of an anaerobic situation, and they're in there eating up all that anaerobic bacteria. And we do pay attention to this because we brew compost tea at work, so we do look at the tea under the microscope, and the ciliates are one of the protozoa that we watch for. We do not want to see a lot of them in our tea. This is happens to be a root-feeding nematode, so there's lots of different kinds of nematodes, lots and lots of different kinds. They all have different mouth parts depending upon what they eat. And this one happens to be a root-feeding one. And you can see that it's been lassoed, and it's actually been lassoed by a fungi. The fungi is releasing a pheromone that's calling that little nematode in, and that nematode is coming in, and the fungi is going to just slowly solubilize that nematode and eat it up. So the soil food web is really all about balance. You know, you have what we say, you know, we like to, my husband hates for me to say good guys and bad guys, but I can't think of another way to say it. But, you know, everyone has their place, and you want it to be in balance. So I've really started to think about the bad guys as not so much bad guys, but as food for someone else. So they're feeding someone else, and you want to have a balance. And this is another nematode that's eating, I think it's eating another nematode. So there's lots of eating going on, just as there is in our life. Here's just an example of the first level is the soil shredders, which we see them. You know, we see the millipedes, the sow bugs. We can see some mites. Sometimes we probably don't like to see termites, but you know, they're out there too, and they're sort of shredding things up. And then we've got the predators, the spiders, the centipedes, the predatory mites, the beetles, some ants. So we've got the predators that come in and go after other life. Then we've got the herbivores. We don't like herbivores so much in the soil, do we? So the symphyllum, who eat the roots of plants, the root maggots, the cicadas. We have a little rock rose in the back corner of our garden, and it's just loaded with cicadas. And you go out there at night, and it's just such a lovely song. And you know, they do a little bit of damage, but they haven't killed any. You know, sometimes, you just accept. There's a balance. And then the fungal feeders that actually feed on the fungi, the springtails, and the mites. So there's a whole family of life out there feeding at all different levels, all to be appreciated, all have their place. I think, the symphyllums, I've heard, I haven't heard of it locally, but I've heard up in Oregon they can be a real problem. Some of the organic farms have had problems with them where they've used just a lot of compost in the soil. And for some reason, that seems to draw the symphyllums in. And then we get to worms. We talked a little bit about them earlier. They're incredibly important. They move the soil. They just move a tremendous amount of soil around. They open up passageways, so they allow the air and the water to get in. Extremely important to get air and water into the soil. They're mixing the subsoil with the organic matter. They're building the structure by moving around. Their digestive system is just this most amazing little inoculation chamber of just a huge amount of diversity of bacteria. So it's a good sign. And when you've got worms in your soil that you've got the foundation of the soil food web going on. So it's a really good sign. And probably most of you have found where you build your compost pile. I always recommend that you build your compost pile in the most compacted part of your soil, the most compacted soil in your garden. Build your compost pile there, and over time, that life in the compost is going to influence and change the soil underneath. And also, that food in the compost is going to call the worms in. You may think that you don't have a worm in your garden, but you probably do. You just haven't put out the right food for them. My husband had in his home in Oakland, he was composting. He had a nice biostack bin that was completely full, pretty much compost. And he went out there one day and pulled the lid back, and it was filled with red worms, just loaded with it. And he was like, where did they come from? And it was great, to see all these worms there. And then he saw his neighbor a couple days later, and she said, I got a worm bin, and all my worms left. So they are intelligent. They're paying attention. If they aren't happy where you put them, they're gonna move if they can, if at all possible. They're gonna move. They're not gonna stay. And these worms traveled a good 50 or 60 feet. How did they know his compost pile was there? I'm pretty amazing. So take good care of your worms because they'll leave. Yeah, they sort of like what we do. They don't want to be in the sun. They need just the right amount of moisture. Don't overfeed them. Add a little bit of compost when you're starting your worm bin, because that really, that's sort of like, that's like the best. And this, can anybody guess what this is? A picture of. Whose action there? It looks pretty good, doesn't it? So that's our dear friend the gopher. He does just a fabulous job of turning the soil. It's just gorgeous. When we moved to our home, like I said, it was just nothing but weeds and lots of gophers. And we wanted to plant a garden our first summer there. We moved in June, and we wanted to plant, a few tomatoes. And so we did, and guess where I planted them? Right there. I planted them right where the gopher had worked all the soil. Now, I know that was probably a really dumb thing to do, but I did it, and I had a great harvest of tomatoes. It was wonderful, but I've never gotten away with doing it again. I think they were just, I don't know what, they were probably amazed, like, she's nuts. We'll leave her alone this year and see what she does. So the gophers really do a good job of opening the soil up. So they have their place. We don't like them because they do so much damage, and I've lost so many plants to gophers. And now pretty much we have to plant everything in baskets because they're relentless. But it is, it is all about balance, and the key to healthy plants is to have a complete soil food web, and also to remember what we consider a pest is food for the predators. And actually the gophers, I see owls hunting them, I see coyotes hunting them, so we have gopher snakes, but they don't eat very many gophers. So there's a lot, even the gophers are they're an important food source for a lot of important animals. This is another picture of just pulling the soil aside and seeing the structure that's built. And you can see you could just, stick your finger down in there. This is in the winter, of course, after it's rained. But it really is amazing, the structure that is built in the soil. So the ways to add life to your soil is compost, compost tea, and mycorrhizal fungi. Compost is really, really important, and with our clay soils, it's really it is the best thing we have to work with clay soils is compost. There's a few different ways in which you can do that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in feeding the soil, compost is really great for helping to build soil structure. And then mulch on top of the soil is very important for feeding the fungal component of the soil. You can always use organic fertilizers should your plant need additional food. Organic fertilizers are broken down by the bacteria and the fungi and released slowly over time to the plant. Then you've got to protect your soil. So mulch is really important for protecting your soil. Sun, wind, and rain are incredibly hard on the soil. They really will compact your soil pretty quickly. So a layer of mulch, either a layer of mulch or a good plant cover is really important. And then also to consider maintaining traffic ways so you're not stomping on your soil. Last year, near my rows, I had the soil over winter rose up that much. And that was just the life in the soil, just, aerating that soil, building all that little soil structure. Over winter, it had risen up that much, and I could not, of course, I didn't step on it, I do like to say work with your native soil and don't remove your native soil. I know that you have really, really heavy clay soil here, and I think that you can work with it and change it, but it takes time to do that. And the soil food web can really help you do that. And mulch and compost are your main tools. And what you want to do once you start working on this is you want to think about how to prevent it from compacting again. So you're not going to want to let your gardener blow your soil ever. You're not going to want to walk across your beds. You're not going to want to go and turn your soil repeatedly by hand or with rototiller. You're not going to want to over-fertilize either with inorganic or organic fertilizers or use a lot of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, because that all compromises the life in the soil, and when they're compromised, your soil becomes compacted. The elements, the sun, the wind, and the rain are on bare soil will get it compact pretty hard. If any of you have ever maybe thought about getting your bed ready in the fall and then not planting it, not putting anything on top of it, when you come back in springtime, you're going to have some nice compacted soil. And then mulch. In nature, there's always a layer of mulch on the soil, so that's extremely important. And as I already said, consequences of compaction is that the fungi and the beneficial nematodes are really most sensitive. There's less air, and so they're going to move away. They're going to go dormant. The earthworms are going to move away, and as all this life starts to move away, the soil compresses and compacts. Yeah. Okay, so the difference between soil and mulch, and maybe do you mean compost and mulch?
Yes, compost and mulch. Yes, I do.
Yeah. And then, so the difference between compost and mulch. Compost is stuff, just think of it in nature as something that, a leaf that's fallen to the ground. When it's completely broken down, you can think of that as compost or humus. So compost or humus is the breakdown of organic matter so that it's no longer discernible. You cannot tell what it came from. So that's compost. And then mulch is, if you can identify what it is, it's mulch. So actually mulch is anything that covers the top of the soil, but what I'm talking about here, specifically mulch, I'm really talking about wood chips, leaves, that sort of thing. So if you know, under your oak tree, you let those leaves sit on top of the soil when they fall, that top layer is mulch. Underneath that, the leaves have broken down. They no longer look like leaves. That's humus or compost. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then eucalyptus. Eucalyptus has a lot of oils in it. And I've heard different things about it, so I'm not sure I can give you a for sure, absolutely 100% correct answer. I have heard two things. I have heard that that it breaks down slower in our environment because we just don't have all the right microbes to break it down. And then I've also heard that it breaks down, that it will break down okay and it's not a problem. I don't really know what to say about that. I don't, in the arbor mulch that we don't get eucalyptus in it. So we keep the eucalyptus out of it. And, so I would say probably, where you have it in your yard?
Yes, yeah.
Well, you could put it for mulch underneath your eucalyptus trees. Yeah. Well, exactly. So that's sort of, I think that sort of says it. So I wouldn't use it to put in your garden. Use it under your eucalyptus trees, or, you know, or if you have a good compost pile and you need a little bit more browns in your compost pile, you could use it as part of your browns for your compost.
Maybe not mulch.
Yeah, I think I would just leave it under the tree, but I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not 100% sure there. Yeah. So you want to open the soil up, and compost tea is probably not the best way to do it, but I like to talk a little bit about compost tea because compost tea is actually the beneficial life that's in really well-made compost. And you can actually brew that up and water it into the root zone of your plant, and it will make a big difference. You will notice a big difference, particularly in potted plants. You just see the color come back and the plant sort of perks up and looks lively. And then always a layer of compost and wood chips on top goes a long way to opening the soil up. But the way to really do that is sheet mulching. And how many of you have heard of sheet mulching or sheet mulched? Yeah. And have you done it on heavy clay soil? And how did it do? Did it make a difference?
This year I've done it.
Oh, okay.
And my soil looks really good.
Yeah.
And small rows of doing it there.
So your soil got better after you did it, or your
No,
soil was
I've been
adding compost?
mulching it for probably 30 years.
Okay.
And I thought,
Yeah.
sheet mulching sounds great because I have so many weeds there.
Yeah.
And it helped with the weeds a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else have any? Yeah.
I did it with newspaper, took out my whole lawn and did it with 6-8 sheets of newspaper.
Right.
And it has improved. I was digging up oxalis
Yeah.
last week right after we had the rain and saw lots of earthworms, which upset me when I dig them up. But
I know.
it's nice to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you use compost too? Compost and mulch, or?
Only where I'm, doing a drought tolerant
Mm-hmm.
landscape, so only where I've actually planted plants.
Yeah.
And I kind of did this right when
Yeah,
So
good.
it doesn't seem a whole lot of rain.
Right, but yeah, I'm going to show you some pictures of that. Well, this is when we first moved to our house. This is what our garden looked like. It was all pretty green weeds. And so we just did a little test patch of sheet mulching. And we used cardboard. And what we did was we laid down about a half-inch layer of compost. And then we put down cardboard, and we overlapped the cardboard really well, 6 to 8 inches or so, so no sun could get down into that soil. And then we put another half an inch or so of mulch on top of that, of compost on top of that. So we ended up having an inch of compost with cardboard sandwiched in between. And then we put about 3 inches of mulch on top of that. And we went through, we did this in the spring, early spring, and then, I wanted to show you this picture. And then we came back in summertime and pulled the mulch aside and stuck our hand right down into the soil and pulled up some nice, fat, juicy worms. And the soil, this was probably in September or so, the soil was still, as you can see, very, very moist. Now, we have a silty clay loam, so we don't have your really heavy clay soil, and it made a huge difference in our silty clay loam. And it just changed the structure of the soil. It opened it up so that air and water could get in. And it's changed it, to this day. So when we moved there, we also had a lot of bindweed, which is really a tough weed. And we found that that as we worked with sheet mulching and as we put in our plants, and we are primarily growing natives, we found that the bindweed started to just go away, and it wasn't really so much of a problem anymore. So it's interesting that you invite in the life into your soil. It actually changes your soil quite a bit. And it changes what grows in your soil. So you're not going to get as many annual weeds, and you're not going to get as many of the bindweeds and such. They're going to be, it's not going to be hospitable to them anymore. So let me just go back. So the clay soil that you have, there's a number of different ways to approach it. Rototilling is an option. Rototilling is not always the best option. Rototilling definitely should not be done if you've got a lot of tree roots around or where you might be damaging roots. But if you aren't going to damage some plants that are really, really important to you, then rototilling or ripping the soil is one way to work with compacted soil. You only want to do it one time. And when you do that, you want to incorporate in 2 to 3 inches of compost, and you want to incorporate it in 6 to 8 inches deep. And the timing with heavy clay soil is really, really important. And that's rough because we haven't had much rain this year. So the timing is you want to catch it not when it's soaking wet and right before it gets dry. You want to catch it when you can put your shovel into the soil and you can actually get your shovel into the soil. You don't want it to be sucking wet. So you want to just find that perfect point there before it dries out, between when it dries out completely and when it's wet, and that's when you want to mix in some compost. You can also mix in some wood amendment like quarter minus fir or redwood amendment. Some people don't like redwood because redwood has redwood trees are pretty antimicrobial. But I've used it with pretty good success in my garden and only used it once. It's done a good job of breaking the clay up, and it breaks down very, very slowly over time. So if it's really heavy clay soil, I think 1 part of either quarter minus fir or fine redwood amendment and 1 or 2 parts of compost. And if you can, work it into your soil to the depth of 6 to 8 inches, that's great. Okay, so the problem with rototilling is that when you rototill, the tines on the rototiller are hitting the same place in the soil, so you're creating, especially in heavy clay soil, you have the possibility of creating a compaction zone down there, so you want to be careful about that, and that's why you do not want to rototill a whole bunch of times over and over again, because you're creating this compaction zone 6 to 8 inches down in your soil, and you don't want to do that. You want your roots of your plants to go deep. The deeper they go, the more access they have to minerals and in the soil, and the more access they have to water. So once again, back to this. So this is a picture of our garden then a few years later after we did our sheet mulching, and we don't have any weeds anymore. And we do not water. We don't have to water at all in the winter. Of course, these are native plants, but we do 0 watering. And they have managed to survive the gophers somehow or another. I don't know. I'm ever thankful to them. So, are there any more questions about clay soils? So, you know, when you sheet mulch, what you're doing is you're putting down life and food in the compost, and with the mulch, you're putting down protection and also food for the fungal component. And that compost is feeding, it's providing life, it's also feeding the life in the soil, it's also calling in the life that lives in your soil and calling the worms in. So they're doing a lot of work. They're doing a lot of the tilling for you and opening the soil up for you. When you rototill or when you rip your soil open and add compost, you're doing it yourself. You're getting the life and you're getting the compost down in there, the food down in there, deep into the soil. And then over time, the life that's existing in your soil is going to come in and start doing some work. So those are 2 ways to go about doing it. Where I live, I can really get away with doing sheet mulching and create tremendous soil structure and open the soil deep. When you have heavy clay soil, you may have to do a little bit more than sheet mulching, but I would be really curious to talk to someone who has really, really heavy clay soil and see how they did with good sheet mulching. I think it might do the ticket. The other thing is cover crops, of course, getting cover crops with lots of roots in them, getting that root down in there in the soil. That's providing food for the life in the soil, and that's providing carbon for the soil, so that also is going to help open your soil up. But not everyone can do cover crops, but it's something interesting to think about. There are plant communities, annuals, and a lot of our vegetables are primarily bacterially dominated. Many shade-loving plants and conifers are fungally dominated, so they live in fungal soils. And a lot of our soils around here are a combination, and where the fungal component and the bacterial component are both important. And I think for roses that would be the case. So compost, really important, and mulch, really important. When I was at the rose garden, I was wishing that I could see some mulch on that soil, and I wonder if, I understand that it's a volunteer garden there, and I wonder if they can get a relationship with some tree trimmers and get some mulch in to cover that soil. Now, I did get a question about you asked the question about black walnut and how that affects compost. And I think, when you buy compost, we have our green waste compost, which is made by our local, local composters. Some municipalities do it themselves. Sometimes they're done by vendors. And this is everything that everyone throws into their green bin, and it goes there, and it's a huge conglomerate of stuff. And I don't, if there is some black walnut in there, I don't think it's a problem, because it's probably a fairly small amount. You need a large amount to really make the difference. And I think what I've been reading is like more than 25%. So I think that's doubtful that you'd get that. So I think when you get your green waste compost, you're getting a great diversity of different feedstock. Green waste compost is, they just have so much material to deal with, and it's very hard for them to keep the moisture level just right and to turn it just when it needs it. So oftentimes when you go to get it, you'll see that it has a bad smell to it. And that's an indication that it's anaerobic. And what you can do then is you just spread it out over the top of your soil, or you let it sit in a pile somewhere until it airs out well, until the aerobic biology comes back. And it will come back, but it just takes a little bit of time. It's not going to be as diverse as something like, we sell compost that Jason Diestel from the Diestel Turkey family makes, and when he was going to Cal Poly for his senior project, he did a project on taking all the turkey waste and turning it into compost, and he's done an excellent job. It's a beautiful compost. When we get it, it's never hot, it's always cool, it never smells bad. And it's very complex. It has a fungal component to it, it has a bacterial component to it, it has a good number of protozoa in it. So compost, it does matter, but that's why I really encourage people to make their own compost. And if you can get a free green waste compost, then spread it out, let it cool down, or leave it in a pile till it's cooled down. Then take some of your really nice homemade compost and inoculate it into that pile, and then you're adding some diversity to it. So I think that's one way around it. The other thing is, so compost, very important, and then mulch, really important. I mean, those are my two big messages, is compost and mulch. Really, really important for building soil structure, because you're adding life and you're feeding the life. And the mulch is there to protect the soil. Don't underestimate how hard the elements are on the soil. And it's also there to feed the soil. And by putting that nice 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch on top of the soil, you're really helping the soil to retain moisture. And the beneficial life in the soil needs moisture. That they need a little bit of moisture. And we do not need to be watering all the time to do that. We can apply compost and mulch and have to water less, actually. So,
do you carry a mulch product?
Yeah. We carry a lot of different mulch products, and my favorite, really, and the least expensive is the arbor mulch. We buy an arbor mulch from a company that gets it from tree trimmers. They're specific about who they'll work with, so they know the inputs. And that's one thing that we like to do in our business, is we like to work with people who know the inputs. They know where it's coming from. And then they grind it up one more time, and it gets a little bit hot, and then we bring it in. And it breaks down nicely. I think it has a nice color to it. When you lay it out, it sort of turns a golden color in time, and I think it does a great job for pretty much all plants. Pretty much. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with compost and mulch, and I'm sure you probably all know this, but you never put it up against the base of your plant. You always want the crown of your plant that to be free of compost and mulch. That's a great place to bring disease in, so you don't want to do that. Keep it away from the base of your plants. And then I always like to recommend the 10 most wanted bugs. As a master gardener and working at help desk, every time I go to help desk, someone's calling in with a horror story about a fearful bug in their garden, and usually it's nothing to be afraid of. And so I really encourage people to, if you're interested in working with soil biology, then you need to get interested in working with the bugs in your garden and figure out who the really good ones are. And whenever you see a bug, I recommend taking a picture of it and going in and Googling and trying to figure out who it is, what it eats, what likes to eat it. I mean, it's just amazing right there. What does it eat and who likes to eat it? And that tells you everything, you know. And if it's a pest, then you figure out what likes to eat it, and then you figure out what plants you can put into your garden that will invite in the beneficial insects. And this is just a great little, the 10 most wanted bugs. If you Google that, you can find it online. It's a great little handout that has just some really simple things you can do to invite in more diversity of life into your garden. This happens to be the northern flicker, and I have it here because we had a young apple tree in our garden. The apple tree was not looking very good last spring. You know, I was like, what's wrong with the leaves? So went out and looked at it, and all the leaves were loaded with aphids, just loaded with aphids, and the ants were running up and down farming the aphids. And so I was like, you know, and it was really loaded, so I didn't want to leave it, but there was no way I was going to spray the aphids, and the ants were keeping the beneficial insects away. So I thought, well, I'll get some tanglefoot, but it took me a while to do that. And then my husband said, hey, there's a new bird in our garden. So we looked it up, northern flicker. The northern flicker feeds its young ants. So went out to the tree, no ants, no aphids. You know, so this was probably over a 2-week period when we noticed it, and I didn't get the tanglefoot. And then he noticed the bird, and it was all taken care of. So there's these wonderful relationships out there that are you know, that are just fantastic, that we can encourage in our garden, and it can make our plants happier, and it can make our life easier. And we're encouraging a diversity of life, which is what it's all about, I think. So to repeat once again, you know, it's always important to know your plant's needs. Add life to the soil, feed the soil, protect the soil, plant flowers to attract beneficial insects. And by the way, when I was at the rose garden today, I was looking at one bed, and it was just loaded with soldier beetles. They were all over. I don't know what normally they go after aphids. I didn't see any aphids, but there were soldier beetles all over this one rose bed. Let the microbes and beneficial insects, the reptiles, the amphibians, the birds do their job. And you know, in my husband's garden in Oakland, he put in a small pond, and within 1 month he had tree frogs in that pond. So you know, there's so much life out there, and we just sort of set the table, and it comes in, and it enriches our life, and it makes our garden a happier and healthier place, I think. So, build soil structure. The benefits of living soil is soil structure, biological soil structure, allowing air and water to penetrate, holding moisture in the soil so we water much less, breaking down pollutants in the soil and in the water, cycling nutrients to plants, building humus in soil, sequestering carbon, and your plants are more disease and pest resistant. And there's our little tree frog. Okay, so, yes. Yes, so we brew tea at work, actively aerated tea, and the question is, that's something you sell, but is that also something maybe I could make? And you can make your own tea. The actively aerated tea is a lot of work, and you need a pump to pump oxygen into it. So what we recommend is making a tea extract. If you have, well, actually, the tea that we sell is all about the life. It's not so much about the soluble nutrients, it's more about the life. So the tea that we sell is made with worm castings, really well-made compost, and a fungal compost. So it's got a good diversity of life in it. And then we put it in these giant tea bags, and we treat our water, because we have chloramined water here, so we treat our water with humic acid to break that bond. And then we put a little bit of food in, and then we put oxygen in there. We pump air into it, and we let it brew for 24 hours. And it turns out looking like tea, sort of. And it has this sort of woodsy sort of smell to it. And it's full of life. It's really all about the life. So it's not about soluble nutrients. There are some soluble nutrients in there, but it's really about inoculating the root zone with life. And that's why I said earlier, when you take that tea and you water it around your plant, you just, I mean, especially a potted plant, it's just like night and day sometimes if your plant's in need. And another thing you can do with that tea is you can, it is not a fungicide, it is not a pesticide, it is, but you can take it and spray it on the leaves of your plant. I have one plant in my office that gets mealybug every couple years or so. Was that part 2? Well, we say that, yes, well let me just, so the mealybug, we spray it, we put the tea on this, I put the tea on this plant, the front and back side of the leaves with tea, and the next day the mealybug are gone, they're gone. On our website, we say do not spray the tea on anything that you're going to eat within so many months, because it is alive, we are brewing it, it is alive. You know, I think it's all beneficial in there, but we just don't want you to eat it. Wait until it's, yeah. Yes, and to be honest with you, Jenny and myself, who do a lot of the tea brewing at work, you know, we had strawberries growing in our bed out there, and we'd pour tea all over the strawberries, and then, you know, like maybe I'd pour tea on the strawberries and not tell Jenny, and she'd grab a strawberry and eat it. I mean, we have both eaten food with fresh tea on it and not gotten sick, but it's not something we would want to recommend to anyone else to do. So you pour it around the root zone of your plant, and that's where it's very beneficial around the root zone, the rhizosphere, and then foliar spray, there will be the microbes actually also really coat the surface of the leaves and keep the leaves healthy. So if your roses, say, if you have a mildew problem, if you spray them with compost tea before it becomes a problem, many, many times that life on the tea will keep the mildew away. You know, but you've got to catch it before. Once it's got it, it's too late. What I was going to say for home brewing, you can, especially if you make your own compost or if you buy a really well-made compost and worm castings, you can make a compost tea extract, and you can just take a mesh bag, and I forget what size mesh it is, but you take a mesh bag. You can email me. On the back, I've got my email information. Put the compost in there. Treat your city water so you get rid of that chloramine. Then take the bag and put it in the water and just massage it with your fingers for a long time, like 15 or 20 minutes. Your fingers get really cold, but you're moving all of that life in the compost, the worm castings, the fungal compost, out into that water, and then water it right away. So you don't need to pump oxygen in it because you're using it right away. And that's a simple way to get the life, not soluble nutrients, but there'll be some soluble nutrients, but to get the life into the root zone of your plant. Yeah. Oh yes, some of the mulches that are on the market are actually colored, various colors, and is that dye a problem? And my understanding is the dye is not a problem, that it's okay. My concern is a lot of those mulches are from ground up pallets and ground up construction wood, and the wood is very, 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 very dry, and so it's nice to have a mulch that's a little bit fresher, a little bit of life left in it. Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation
on mulch? Well, I really like the arbor mulch from Tree Trimmers. If you can find out what kind of trees Don't ever get anything that where they've trimmed with palm. I got a little bit in my mulch once, and I had like palm trees. I was amazed from this little piece of hardly anything. I had palm trees in no time that were that big. It was amazing. So find out what kind of tree it is, and yeah. Well, it just depends. Oh yes, I keep forgetting that. If you had to add soil into a raised bed, what would you use? And there are lots of different kinds out there. It depends on a couple things, like how high the bed is. If the bed is, you know, how high is the bed?
It's what, 18, 20 inches?
18 or 20 inches. So, and what are you going to be growing?
Probably some flowers.
Growing some flowers. Okay. Well, I would at 18 or 20 inches deep for a raised bed, I would probably want to have some topsoil in it, just because that's a lot to put all organic matter in. That organic matter, if you put in 18 inches of organic matter in 1 year, it's going to shrink down quite a bit, maybe almost by half. So if you can put some topsoil in, that's good. And then you amend the topsoil with compost and maybe a little bit of fir or redwood amendment. And depending upon the needs of the plant, you might want to add a little bit organic fertilizers to give them just a little bit more, give the life in the soil a little bit more food to work with. I don't, but if you email me, I'll email you. I'll email you some slide. Yeah. Yes? Okay, so you're using milk as a wetting agent for your foliar feeding, and you're wondering if the compost tea, the life in the compost tea will be in conflict with the life in the milk. And I don't think so. We've, in our compost tea brewer, we've had lactobacillus in it, and that's, you know, what's in milk. So I think you're okay. I don't think there's a problem there. You're just adding more diversity. So humic acid for removing the chloramine from the water, and what is humic acid, and how much do you need, and how long does it take? Well, humic acid is it's a big, long carbon chain, very complex. It has the ability to, it just has the ability to break the bond between the chlorine and the ammonia. And so that then it's no longer a disinfectant. And it does it, according to Dr. Ingham, it does it almost immediately. So as soon as you put it in the water and you see the water change color, she says the bond is broken. And that's what we do when we brew our tea. And so we've got good numbers of microbes in our tea. So I think it works pretty instantaneously. And once you add that humic acid to the water, the bond is broken. So, you know, it lasts. I mean, there's no particular shelf life to it. It's always probably good to use that water as soon as possible. And as far as, there's a lot of different products on the market, and there's different kinds of humic acids. The kind that we like the best is the kind that comes from ancient water deposits from Florida, actually, and we prefer that over the rock, the leonardite. And so that's what I would recommend. And I think usually when you look at when you're thinking of buying humic acid, just see what the source is and where it came from. Pardon? Oh, the volume. Yeah, you hardly need any. And I think in our tea, in a 100-gallon tea brewer, we're using 2 cups of humic acid to treat that. That's all we're using. Yeah. Can you buy nematodes? Yes, you can. You can buy them. You can buy them. There's Rincon Ventova in Southern California, and they sell They sell all kinds of beneficial insects. You can go to their website. It's very helpful. You can call there. They're very friendly and very helpful. Yeah. That's how thick of a mulch is too much so the air can't get in. And that is an interesting question. I think that a lot of mulches are fairly coarse, and so the air is going to get in. Something like ground redwood bark, which some people call gorilla hair, it's a very, very fibrous material. That will really pack down on the soil. That is one mulch that I would say do not use. I know some people love it and swear by it, but I've seen it pack down hard as a rock, and it really does a great job of sucking up all the water, and so it's one I wouldn't use. You know, I've had people have concerns about doing sheet mulching, where you're doing compost and then you're doing a layer of cardboard, and then you're doing another layer of compost, and then you're doing mulch on top of that, and saying that the soil below can be deprived of oxygen. I've had someone bring that up, but I have not actually experienced that. And most of the mulches that I see are chunky enough that it's not a problem. And I think if you're only going, you know, a half an inch or so with your compost, an inch or so with your compost, I don't think it's gonna be a problem with air. But oh, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I have samples of mulch if you want to see it.